Well, hello everybody. Welcome to the latest episode. It's the Keen and Judah Show on deadline day, baby. There's plenty of twists, plenty of turns to come. Remember, all the news, all the latest breaking news, and hopefully all the signings you can find on expressandstar.com. But today for the Keen and Judah Show, as always, we'll be looking back on Saturday's disappointing defeat, 3-2 to Everton. And to be honest, overall, Liam, I actually think that the scoreline flattered Wolves a little bit, which I know is disappointing for Wolves fans to hear and watch us now, but I do think that there was more between the sides than just a goal on the day.
No, I agree. I think you look at that forward line of Everton. We discussed it on the day as well. You know, I think Beto's a decent enough striker. I know he scored in the game, but maybe not someone I would class as outstanding. But that three
Yeah.
behind them, I think, is the highlight really.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Grealish, Dewsbury Hall, and Ndiaye just caused Wolves all sorts of problems, and Wolves could not contain them. The defending was really, really poor on several occasions. Hence why Everton were able to get that advantage. And yet Wolves did have a resurgence at the end. At 1-1, they had a brief resurgence there as well. But otherwise, Everton were on top. Everton were the better team and definitely deserved to win the game.
Yeah, I agree. So it's 2 up, 4 down today, unfortunately. We've got to start with the down. We've got to start with the person who was on the down last week, and I think he was on the down show for the Manchester City game as well. It continues, and it is a worrying pattern here. Emmanuel Agbadou, another disappointing afternoon. Maybe not quite as bad as previous games, but at the same time, distribution-wise, giving the ball away. That third goal, I think the Dewsbury Hall goal, just a woeful pass. These aren't just errors that are throughout the game and lack of concentration. This is costing Wolves goals and costing Wolves points.
Yeah, without a doubt. We've said consistently throughout pre-season that his performance has been nowhere near good enough, and it's been a bit of a warning sign going into the start of the Premier League season. And he's had some okay moments here and there after a pretty disastrous start against Man City. And we would hope that he was getting slowly up to speed and slowly getting better. Vitor Pereira insists that it's nothing to be concerned about. The trend and the pattern over the last couple of months, really now, including pre-season, I say would highlight a bit of an issue. Emmanuel Agbadou has been fantastic for this football club since he arrived in January. Helped a big part of the club staying in the Premier League. Right now, he's a big part of the club losing games. His performance has been way off it. The first goal, it's not just him because Totti has to do a hell of a lot better as well. But he completely loses Beto for that first goal. And then for the third goal as well, gives the ball away with a really terrible pass, which has been the highlight, or the running trend really of his season so far, giving the ball away far too often, far too easily and cheaply and unnecessarily. Gives it away, and it's one pass to Dewsbury Hall. Yeah, it's fortunate that it's a fantastic strike on his part, and unfortunate for Wolves. And perhaps the club were a little bit unlucky on that front, but he creates his own problems by giving the ball away once again. He has to cut that out. That has to be a change, and we have to get him closer to what we saw last season, because without him, Wolves are really struggling.
Yeah, they are big time. Let's go a bit more positive, and someone who's had a decent week, actually, 2 goals in 5 days, and that's Rodrigo Gomez. Got his start against West Ham, and look, full of running, will always have an eye for goal. We saw that in pre-season last year as well. I think he'll be disappointed with the amount of game time he's had since then. We all thought that probably he would get a little bit more this season, but with the signings that Wolves have made, perhaps not. But came on again, scored another goal, gave Wolves a lifeline. Like I say, all action, but I just don't know where he fits into this side. And maybe him being so versatile is actually a detriment.
I'm pleased that we're able to have at least a couple of positives here. There's not a lot at the moment.
No,
but
there's not a
Rodrigo
lot. No,
Gomez,
we were really struggling in our note this morning.
we were a little bit, but Rodrigo Gomez is definitely one of those positives at the moment. He's really a sort of victim of circumstance in certain ways, in the sense that Hoover has impressed the manager and stuck with the club this season. They brought Tachua in, but now also on the flip side to that, Hoover's now injured, and if it wasn't for that injury, Rodrigo definitely doesn't come off the bench probably against Everton. Maybe doesn't start the game against West Ham in the cup as well, and of course he scores in both games. So he's fortunate really that he's had that opportunity. I do think he deserves more opportunities, and I hope that trend continues. What we've seen in him is a player, as you say, is always a willing runner, works very, very hard, when Wolves were, at 3-2 and trying to get back into the game, there was a moment when he raced back, tracked back, put his body on the line, won the ball back, got Wolves back up the pitch again, and the crowd started to get back into the game
Mhm, mhm.
purely based off his action and his willingness, his desire, his determination. That's what we need to see in some
Yeah.
other players that frankly aren't showing it at the moment. And when the goal happened, I mean, it's a really good finish. He does brilliantly to arrive in the box at the
Mhm.
speed and timing at which he does. I don't know if you remember this, but as the cross comes in from Wolf, we're sat watching it, and I did turn to you and say, "There's no one there," because there was no one in the box. And
No.
all of a sudden, Rodrigo somehow manages to get there. He looked like he was nowhere near the ball, and he uses. I mean, we know he's got raw pace anyway, but
Sure.
it was incredible how quickly he got to it. Just nips ahead of the defender, and it's into the roof of the net. Fantastic finish. Pleased for him as well on Tuesday to get that against West Ham, an important goal. And quite again similar in the sense that he uses his pace to anticipate an action, anticipate a moment, and gets there first. Maybe slightly fortunate with the finish, but in the sense that the goalkeeper maybe should have done better. But I'm pleased for him because we worry a little bit about his chances when Hoover's fit and available, and whether he'll even potentially make the bench on occasions. I've also said I'd like to see him further forward on occasions. At the moment, he's proving to Vitor Pereira why he should be in and around this team and why he's a good option.
Yeah, you've got the good of him scoring goals and all energy. You got the bad, I guess. You see him Tuesday night with him quite
Yeah.
easily beaten by Southcheck and being at the back post. But that's a mismatch in itself, isn't it? Whether that overload should happen in that specific spot, remains to be seen. But yeah, it's an interesting one. I'll be fascinated to see what happens with Rodrigo Gomez this season. But look, definitely one of the positives from Saturday. Let's go on to another disappointment, and that is someone who I think came with a lot of fanfare, really, and we were both excited with him. And look, I still think that there's a good player there. You know, World Club Cup team of the tournament, John Arias, who's come here and he's going to take time. We spoke to Vito Pereira after after the game and the press conference, and he kind of said, "Look, these players are going to have to take time to get used to the Premier League," and you'd expect that, but I haven't seen enough from Arias yet for him to warrant a nailed on starting spot week in, week out. And I think that's what he was brought in to do. Look, international break comes, there's going to be a lot of players leaving to go across to for their countries. But when they come back, when they're away at Newcastle United, I think that John Arias' place, along with quite a few others, by the way, will be under threat.
No, and I think fairly so as well. Yeah, he needs time. Of course he does. We've seen Andre come from Fluminense in Brazil and take a little bit of time to settle in
Mm,
and how good he was. And I think you have to give a little bit of time to Arias as well. I think it's only fair to do that. At the same time, he's 27. He's a lot more
hmm
experienced,
for
older
sure.
than Andre was and other players are
Yeah.
at this football club. And in a time when Wolves have lost a lot of goals in the summer with players that have departed, lost a lot of quality,
hmm
they have to replace that with some quality. And
hmm
Arias has been that one player that we've all looked at and thought he could be the player that it gets closest to this quality that we're missing.
Yeah.
And so far, he's not even been close, in my
hmm
opinion.
hmm
What you do need when you are giving a player a little bit of time is some signs. I think in the second half, maybe against West Ham, we saw a couple of signs where I thought he did okay,
hmm
did better than we'd seen in previous performances. But overall, they've not been anywhere near enough instances or signs where we can think, right, pinpoint exactly where he's dangerous, pinpoint
Yeah.
exactly where he's impacting the team. I've not seen anywhere near enough of that so
No.
far, and that's the biggest thing that he needs to change and improve. And there's a player I won't mention the name because I know we're going to be talking about this player. But there's a much younger summer signing in the forward areas that has shown a
Mhm.
lot more in certain games than Arias, and unfortunately, he has to do a hell of a lot better. And Wolves need him to do better as well
Sure.
because the the depth in that area is not massive.
Let's go to the down. And this is a person who I think had promising games to start with, obviously coming off the bench as well. Raw pace and first Premier League start for Jackson Tachua. But yeah, kind of flattered to see, really. Didn't really get into the game. Maybe it wasn't the type of game for him and didn't really get enough opportunities, I think, to get down that line. I think that's what he's going to be good at, to beating plays. He just didn't really have the chance because look, Wolves were defending for large amounts of this game. They were on the back foot from minute one, really, and backing off Everton and inviting that pressure. So, maybe on the counter attack, when Wolves do get into a system that they like and that they're starting to create chances, he will come up trumps. But in terms of I guess his performance, I think for his debut, he'll be disappointed with what happened on the day.
Yeah, I think so. There was a few times in that first half when Wolves were almost telegraphing it really, where they were
Mm,
trying to find that long crossfield pass for him. and a lot of them were overhit, which is not his fault, of course. And he was finding a little bit of space, and you thought, okay, well, there might be a little bit of opportunity here for Wolves to be
Yeah.
dangerous on that far side. They never really found him, and as the game progressed and it became a bit more condensed and a bit tighter, and Everton were a
Mhm.
bit more narrow and a bit deeper, particularly when Wolves were trying to score well the second and the third.
Mhm.
Um, Satchel, when he was on the pitch during that time, I felt wasn't able to find the right spaces.
Mhm.
When he did have the ball, he gave the ball away far too often. There was a few
Yeah.
times right in front of the dugout and right in front of where we were sat that he gave the ball away so needlessly or knocked it out for a throw in, and he was
Mhm.
very quickly hauled off the pitch. And obviously, Rodrigo took his place at that point and did pretty well. And I just felt that when Wolves needed someone to spark the game into life, maybe take someone on and get to a byline and just put the defence and the fullbacks in particular under a little bit of pressure, he wasn't able to deliver on that. And that
Mhm.
was a
Mhm.
disappointing thing. I don't have as many concerns with him as I do about some of the other players we're talking about because we've seen some signs in other
Sure.
games. And obviously, the assist for Larson against West Ham in the Cup was a really good one. But just not his best day. And when Wolves are lacking a little bit of that creativity and spark and ingenuity and pace, you need someone like that to step up in those moments. And he definitely didn't do that.
It's 2 or 4 down. I'm gonna go with one more down before we can finish on a good note, maybe a little bit of a positive. So, yeah, difficult this one. I'm not saying that it was a terrible game for him. Look, we've discussed about him finishing, and he needs to find, better touch. But disappointing game for Marshall Manetzi, as it was for quite a few of the games, but a few players. But I do feel like Manetzi now, obviously great engine on him, playing 90 minutes week in, week out. Vitor really likes him, likes what he does off the ball. We've discussed in depth about his contributions, and they are important contributions to this side because work rate, I think, is something that a lot of these players are actually lacking. There's a few of them that are excellent, especially in the middle of the park, and I think up top, work rate can be questioned at times. And Marshall Manetzi is definitely one of those who give you, all that and more. But in terms of overall production into a game where you look at this squad and you look at the makeup of it and you look at the amount of goals that they're going to score and the chances they're going to create, I'm not sure whether Menezes is going to bring you that. How often, when you have a disappointing game like that, can you keep again someone in? We've discussed Arias and now Menezes, who's not really creating too much in terms of xG or assists or goals. There's just not a lot there really. You've got a runner, but when you've only just got a runner and you're struggling and you've lost 3 games out of 3 in the Premier League, there are question marks that there.
Yeah, I think it's a fair question. There's a lot of things to like about Manetzi. All the things you just described. Works very hard, willing runner, can cause a little bit of chaos and danger when Wolves are going
Yeah.
long and he's in the
Mhm.
box and he's putting himself about. When Wolves are trying to play, and particularly from the start of the game, he needs to have a bit more quality around
Mhm.
him.
Mhm.
And from the start, we didn't have that. I know Huang did score, and he put a really good cross in Manetzi, so he deserves
Yeah.
credit for that. It was a
Yeah.
fantastic cross for the assist for Huang. There wasn't a lot of quality around him, and when that quality isn't around him, there wasn't really a lot of point in having Manetzi there because you need the quality on the pitch. And he isn't going to score you lots of goals. He isn't going to get you loads of assists. He isn't that kind of player. That's not his
No.
role in the team. But if you are going to play him, you need that from other players there. And it's not there at the moment. And that's my biggest concern about playing him. As I say, when Wolves were trying to force an equaliser and Kalajdzic was on the pitch and putting himself about, Venezia was more dangerous then because he was getting
Mm.
closer to Kalajdzic. He was in the box. He was winning headers, getting knockdowns, holding the ball up, making himself a bit of a nuisance. But from the start of a game, when Wolves are trying to play and they're trying to look after the ball and they're trying to feed it through to Huang and Arias, who are different types of players,
Mhm.
particularly different types of players to Larson, who of course wasn't playing,
Mhm.
then the Menetzi experiment, if you will, doesn't really work. That's why for me, he's a player you bring on in the last 20 minutes to make that impact
Mhm.
if you're chasing a game, or the work rate to try and hold on to a game, or you start him in, depending on the fixture and the certain type of opponent you're playing, when you've got certain players on the pitch that suit his style. And that front three of Arias, Huang, and Menetzi definitely did not work. So regardless of the goal that they scored and the assist he got. So that for me is the biggest question mark. I don't think he can continue to be a nailed on starter and a
No.
nailed on 90-minute
Mm.
performance every
Mhm.
single week. They're two different things, but for me, it's the same conclusion.
I know Everton play a different formation, but we discuss the likes of Ndai, Dewsbury Hall, Jack Grealish, and then you're comparing them to John Arias and Marshall Manetzi. Like, it's just completely night and day to to a team that has been in and around Wolves for the last 2 seasons, and I think that's the worrying thing for me. I do feel like Everton will be, comfortably mid-table this season, but at the same time, the difference in quality. You look at, Everton have kept their better players, and they've also assessed and they've gone, okay, we need A, B, and C, and they've put square pegs in square holes, and I'm not too sure whether Wolves have done that so far. Remains to be seen, of course, with deadline day fast approaching, 7 p.m. tonight. Right, let's finish on a good point. And look, we were all devastated for him, and he was devastated, wasn't he, when he was told that he wasn't going to get on against Bournemouth, and that's Fer Lopez. But came on, was bright, made some good runs, and I just wonder now. They've given him, I think, a little bit of time to settle in, and you can understand that. But I think that Fer Lopez, when he comes back from the international break, will be gunning for a start at St James's Park.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, we're going to talk more about the Newcastle game a little bit closer to the time, but very quickly on that in particular,
Mm.
he might be struggling to start there because it's away from home at St James's Park, and they may go with the Menezzi hard working, keep it tight kind of situation. But it's based
Maybe, yeah, I was
purely
going to
off
say
his
Menezzi and Fer Lopez, but we'll see.
potentially. But what we've seen with his impact, we can only judge and base it off what we've seen, and particularly in this game against Everton, is a player that came on and made a difference, and it was bright
Hmm.
and it was forward
Hmm.
thinking. Now, when he came on, he played on that right hand side again. He had obviously Rodrigo Gomez to his right, who was doing
Hmm.
well and making attacking runs, but he dropped a little bit deeper,
Hmm.
just took up a little bit of a space, a gap, a hole in between the midfield and defence that Everton was struggling to pick up, and he picked that space kept receiving the ball, turned, very, very nice turn of pace as well to get away from a couple of opposition players. And his first thought every single time was a forward pass. He received the ball, he turned, he found a forward pass. There was a couple of occasions they didn't come off. There was a couple of occasions he looked frustrated and Vitor was trying to give him a bit of encouragement. But when it did come off, he was pinging lovely crossfield balls and finding Hugo Bueno or David Moller-Wolf on that left-hand side, or he was finding little intricate passes and triangles with Rodrigo Gomez closer to him, or he was going direct into the forward players and strikers. And he was just forward thinking direct and putting a couple of good free kicks and crosses as well. It was a really good cameo slash
Hmm.
impact from Fer Lopez off the bench. And that's why I want to see more from someone like an Arias, because Fer Lopez is 6 years younger than him and far
Sure.
less experienced
Yeah.
and is still having a bigger impact. And also, I think Fer Lopez is closing in and getting much closer to a start and should be feeling fairly aggrieved if he doesn't get one pretty soon.
Yeah, not starting the Premier League yet, and kind of like not, I guess, scarred yet, is he? Do you know what I mean? In terms of like
Mm.
starting those games, there's a few of them, even like you said, like Arias, like probably head down like crikey, but at
He's
least
a
he
bit
hasn't been.
fearless, isn't he, Fer Lopez? Yeah, he goes out there and
Yeah,
just wants
yeah,
to play.
and look, you might need that going forward because
Mm.
you know I've not seen enough from some of these starters yet that they warrant nailed on place in the Top Pereira side at this moment in time. It's going to be fascinating. Throughout the international break, going into that Newcastle game as Wolves look for their first points or point of the Premier League season. Mr. Liam Keane, thank you very much. Big day for us. So let's get off and make some calls.
Let's get on it, mate. Let's hope it's a busy one.
All right.